start off with, you're going to need your owner's manual, your jack, and your tire iron. This is an example of a Sierra Classic owner's manual. This is the jack to the GMC Sierra we will be working with today. Here's an overview of your owner's manual, your jack, and on the far right, that is the tire iron we will be using today as well. The first step we will be doing today is loosening the lug nuts on your vehicle. This is my wonderful assistant Zeb. He will be working with us today. As you can see, he's taking off the nuts for the hubcaps as we speak. Zeb is using the tire iron, turning the nuts from right to left to loosen them. As you can see, Zeb is using the tire iron to loosen the lug nuts. We're doing this before we utilize the jack. Step 2, placing and using jack to lift the tire. Take notice where Zeb has placed the jack. It's underneath a sturdy place underneath the rear axle. As you can see, Zeb is using the tire iron to lift up the jack going from left to right. And look at him go. Zeb is still working on that jack, raising it up and going from left to right as I said. Notice the center, how the great placement of the jack is. Zeb's doing a very good job. Zeb's finishing up, raising up that axle to take off the tire. And that moves us on to step 3, taking off the lug nuts and tire. Zeb is finishing taking the lug nuts off by hand. And the reason we want to do this before we jack up the tires for the fact that we don't want the tire to spin, and that resistance really helps get the lug nuts loose. After getting the lug nuts off, the tire just easily comes out and you can roll out of the way for the new one. Which brings us to step 4, putting the spare tire back on. After removing the bad tire, you can see Zeb is getting the new tire put on. It's important to line up the wheel spokes with the holes in the rim. I can't emphasize this enough. If you gotta get her placed in so she's securely so you can eventually put your lug nuts back on. And here's a close-up there for you. Which then takes us to step 5, putting the lug nuts back on. As you can see, Zeb is putting the lug nuts back on by hand. It's important to do this first before we take the jack down because remember, we need that resistance in order to get it properly tight. That takes us to step 6, tightening lug nuts appropriately. Take notice in Zeb tightening the lug nuts. And if you look closely, he's going to be doing what's called a star pattern. You want to make sure these lug nuts are on tight so your wheel isn't wobbling. You want to do a high quality job. After finishing that, we move on to step 7, removing the jack. Lowering the jack is just opposite of raising the jack. Instead of going right, we're going left. And as you can tell from Zeb's expression on his face, he's just thrilled to be helping me with this video project. Final step, double check to assure lug nuts are tight and putting hubcap back on. Zeb's just going back through assuring that his lug nuts are tight. You don't want to have loose lug nuts going down the road. And he's going to be going through the star pattern like we talked about earlier. It's always good to use that star pattern to maximize the tightness on your lug nuts. As you can see, Zeb's going back through and he's putting the nuts on for the hubcap. Those are the finishing touches for your spare tire and changing a tire. This is the finished project after changing the tire. This is a great tool to use just in case you have a flat until you get your original tire fixed or replaced.